I bring these things up because I really didn't know that you could be emotionally exhausted. And even to unravel your trauma and unravel your pain can be emotionally exhausting. Welcome to Outside of Eden, the podcast. I am Brianna, your host. And it is the evening where I am, so the lighting may seem a little dim, but I am learning not to be a perfectionist. I'm learning that, you know what, it's better to move forward, move on, versus living a life where perfectionism kind of controls whether or not you move. So we're here. I hope that your day is blessed. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe so that you can be updated when I post. And most importantly, I'm honestly also just now filming because I just kind of took the day with ease. I kind of allowed the Lord to direct me throughout this day. And majority of my day, I rested and studied. And so that was the priority for today. And of course, getting the podcast recorded. And speaking of that, I really want to talk about how God speaks through exhaustion. Right? These moments where we are fatigued, we're tired, and we're just drained from life. And then there's multiple factors in our lives that drain us or causes us to be fatigued. And fatigue can come in multiple ways. We can have physical exhaustion, we can have mental exhaustion, and we can have emotional exhaustion. And all of these things play into your overall well-being and ability to just be able to hear God, be able to take the whims that life throws at you, the ability to serve people, including your family, including people that you have to serve at work. And I think when you are exhausted, it is harder to give to your purpose, to give to what God has designed you to be here on earth. I had a therapy appointment on yesterday. Yes, I believe in therapy. I believe everybody should have a therapist. We live in a fallen world. And so we are going to incur sufferings and trauma in this life. And so I think it's important for everyone to have a therapist. I think therapists should have therapists. And so it's been a beautiful journey. I always pray before my therapy appointments. And I do believe that the Lord equips professionals with the skills that they need in order to help us unwrap and unravel and discover elements of ourselves. And so I do believe that the Lord used therapists, just like I believe the Lord uses doctors, just like I believe the Lord uses pastors. He is the one that instills them with the knowledge that they have. He is the one that equips them. God is the God of blessings. He is the reason that we have the blessings that we have. And God is the God of limits. He is the one that authors all limits that we have. Exhaustion, I feel like, is one of those limits. Back to what I was talking about concerning my therapist. I was having a conversation with my therapist. We were talking about some things concerning my emotions coming from my old life to my new life. And it's kind of something that he brought up. It's not something necessarily that I wanted to talk about. And it's funny because I talked about this in the last episode. So we ended up talking about it. And I got emotional because I started to speak about how my new life in following Christ, my new identity in Christ, there's this element of outcast that I feel, this element of loneliness that I feel. And I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but there's this element where you know that you are different. And so in many spaces where you were once accepted, those spaces you are now looked at as different, as someone who people don't necessarily care to be around anymore because your presence is a conviction to them. Especially when you're living a life that is righteous and you're stepping into the shoes of trying to be holy in all your ways. And holy just means set apart in all your ways. It can cause people to be uncomfortable when they're around you. People that used to accept me when I was living in sin see me differently now that I live for the Lord. And so that's just one experience that I've been experiencing. And I realized after the therapy session, I was literally drained. And I was like, I didn't do anything. I literally just talked to someone. But I had to come to the realization that emotional exhaustion is a thing. We know that physical exhaustion is a thing when we're exerting our body to do different things, manual labor in the gym, whatever we're doing physically. We know that physical exertion can cause exhaustion, but the element of emotional exhaustion didn't even cross my mind as to why I was so tired after that conversation. There's also this element of mental exhaustion, like the overuse of your brain. There are some people who have jobs where they have to use their brain to make money. Mental exhaustion can also come from people who have to problem solve a lot. Like if you have a family and you have a lot of issues within your life or financial issues, you have to problem solve as to, okay, how can I put food on the table with this amount of money that I have? My child is going through this. How can I be a help to them? There's always this need to problem solve, this mental exhaustion, right? Or at least our human tendency to want to problem solve. I think to want to solve all of our problems on our own is a human tendency. It's not what God wants for us. Because God tells us to cast our worries and our burdens onto him. He is the one that wants to be able to solve your problems. He takes literal delight in solving them. I think the human tendency is to want to have control over the things that we are enduring. But not only that, if I give it to God, I got to wait on God. There's that element of waiting on God to solve the problem, because it may not be within seconds of you asking him for help. He may not give you the answer to the problem until like a week later, 3 days later, maybe that night. You know what I mean? And so we will mentally exhaust ourselves trying to solve things on our own. Yeah. And so that's also why I believe we should have a therapist, because therapists can be vessels for God. God can use therapists as a vessel for his glory to help his people get the healing that they need, the new perspective that they need, the unlearning of thought patterns that they need. He can use them. I promise you he can. He's doing it in my life. I see it. I feel it, because I always pray before every single session that I have. I pray for the therapist and I pray for me. And the therapist always asks me the right questions to get me to think, to get me to change my perspective, to get me to look at it from a different angle, to get me to observe other options or other ways that I could have done or handled something. I bring these things up because I really didn't know that you could be emotionally exhausted. And even to unravel your trauma and unravel your pain can be emotionally exhausting, because it is a part of the healing process. I think there is this part of the healing process where it takes unpacking things so that you can discover what is actually going on here. What does this actually root from? Where does this pain, where does me talking like this to people, treating people like this, operating in this way. Where does this come from? Being able to find the root of the situation is exhausting. Being able to go back into time is exhausting. But I think in order for us to be able to heal from things, which obviously requires God, in order for this to happen, you have to be aware of it first. And I think too, that's why I'm always asking God to expose things. I ask God to expose my heart. I ask God to expose my thought patterns. I ask God to expose habits that are hurting me. You literally, He will start opening your eyes and helping you to discern things that you didn't even think were a problem before. You see what I'm saying? But I think a lot of the times we walk around unaware of our toxicity on planet Earth. If we're unconscious of it, how do we know that it needs some attention? It needs God to step in. But that's what I love about God, because even when we're unaware, He will expose things to us. And sometimes when we're just like, our heart is hardened, or we're just kind of like blind to certain things, it's like God will keep sending the same message over and over again, over and over again, until you hear Him, until you are aware. I don't think God ever says anything new to us. Like, His word is the same. His word is the same and forevermore. It's timeless. It's like He's not saying anything new that's not already in His word. He's not saying anything new that He has not already told you. It's like we're just now seeing it for ourselves. Oh, wait, I haven't taken the time to heal from this, so now I'm taking it into new relationships. But like when we keep seeing, like, or maybe we don't see it, when we keep having like the same patterns and we're the common denominator, what's the same thing that God had tried to tell you the first time? But it took a couple of times for the instance to repeat itself for us to actually see that we need help. And so God has given us free will on planet Earth. I think there are instances where some people are thinking that, well, God knows that this is an issue, and God knows I struggle with this, and God knows I need help financially, and God knows I struggle with this mentally, and God knows I haven't gotten over this. God has given you free will. God has also given us the ability to choose Him. If we really want help with something, we have to surrender and we have to ask for help. I know that's hard to hear, knowing that God knows everything, but He is not a God that is going to force Himself onto us. He loves us. And so I don't think that love is forceful. I don't think that God is forceful. I think that He wants us to choose Him. He wants us to cast our burdens and our anxieties on Him. He wants us to cast our need for healing onto Him, because essentially this tells Him, I trust you. See what I'm saying? It is an element of trust. It shows God that we trust Him when we give it to Him. So we have to ask for help. Ultimately, I think mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion are limits. They are one of the many limits that God puts on humans. We are in the human body, so we have the limit of the need for rest. We eventually have to rest. We only have 24 hours in a day, and we need food to survive. We can only go so long without food. We can only go so long without water. And so exhaustion is one of the many limits of other limits that God has given us. And so there's this limit of being single and being married. Both of them have limits, but the limits are very different. There's this limit of having children and not having children. Both of them have limits, but the limits are very different. There's these limits of age, but the limits are very different. Children are way more energetic than older people. There's this limit of our age. Being a child, being an adult, and being an elder. Elders move slower. They talk slower. They have restrictions. They're more fragile. Children are more energetic. We all have limits, and all of our limits are very different. But I think exhaustion is one of those limits that God uses to warn us. Hey, you're in overload. Hey, you need rest. Hey, come to me so that you may be established. I may establish rest in you. Come to me and give me your burdens, your anxieties, your exhaustions. Give it to me. Hey, this is a warning that you've involved yourself beyond your limits. There are things that you are doing that may not necessarily be important to your purpose, but you have piled them onto your plate. And so now you are literally drained from it all. I think in these moments where we are in overload at work, for instance, where we're doing overtime and we're adding more hours to our plate outside of the basis of what we need to work in order to keep our jobs. I think in a sense, for me, it was like, okay, I'm working more because obviously I think that I need more money, right? But if I feel like there's this small amount that I've been given, I don't think that it's enough to sustain me. I think that sometimes we can think that what God has given us is not enough and that He can't do with what He has given us. So we take it into our own hands to go and gain more and do more, because what I have and what God has given me and the limits that God have put on me, whether that's a financial limit that He has given me, because even wealth is a limit. The amount of wealth that we have is a limit. If I go and I try to do more, whatever way that I am going outside of God and what He has given me, I think is when we start to go into these periods of exhaustion. Because even financially, if we don't embrace the financial limits that have been given to us and know that what God has given you is enough. Know that He is very strategic in everything that He does. He does not make mistakes. Every limit that He has given you, the way you talk, the way you walk, your personality, your appearance, everything that God has given you, the amount of money that He has allowed you to have, the amount of children that He has allowed you to have, God has given you specificity of limits. And going beyond that and trying to go outside of that is in a way going outside of God, outside of Eden, outside of our limits. I am not someone who has not done it. I am not someone who can sit here and say, "Oh, I've never gone outside of the limits that God has given me." I've done it. I've done it. I still do it, and God has to correct me and say, "Hey, you're tired. You're exhausted." He's my Father, so He has to kind of instruct me and redirect me when I like I said on one of my episodes, when you go right, you don't ever have to worry if you were supposed to go left, because He's going to correct you. And one of the ways that He will correct you is through exhaustion. And so I think another way that we can identify that we are exhausted is when we are fatigued, when we are irritable, when we are stressed, when we have lost our joy. it can signify and be warnings that, hey, you've reached a limit. We have to know our limits so that we don't go beyond them. Because I think in overload, I think in exhaustion, I think in fatigue, our ability to discern is altered. I think our ability to make decisions is altered, especially life altering decisions. I honestly don't think that we should make life altering decisions, one, without God, and two, when we are exhausted. And I'm going to give you a biblical reason as to why I say this, but I think in a calm mind, we in Jerry, I was listening to Jerry on stress management, Jerry Flowers on stress management, and he said that a calm mind is the secretary for discernment. Because I think whenever we are in overload or we have a lot on our mind or we're worried, our discernment is off. Our ability to really see with a healthy eye. And so the Bible tells us that the eye is a lamp to our body. If our eye is it says something, if our eye is something, then our whole body will be full of darkness, meaning that whatever we're doing is not going to flow from light, because the way we're seeing it, the way we're discerning it, is not healthy, it's not of light. So anyways, it's just this idea that in order for us to have discernment, good discernment, not discernment that is altered, we have to be in a calm, rested state. We have to be in a state where we are not of worry and fatigue and exhaustion. But so another reason why I say that our decisions can be very much altered when we're exhausted is because I did some research just on exhaustion and in biblical examples of this and in ways that the Bible can teach us about exhaustion. But I mean, the story that really stood out to me, because I found several examples, but the story that really stood out to me was the story of Esau and Jacob. Now, Esau was the firstborn. Jacob was the secondborn. And so the Bible literally talks about, I'm in Genesis 25 and 27. It says, so the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man dwelling in the tents. So Esau was the one who was out and about in the field. He was a hunter. He was physically exerting himself, whereas Jacob was a mild man dwelling in the tents. He was in a space where his life was a little more calmer than Esau's. If I'm in the tent, I'm dwelling in the tent, I'm mild. The Bible literally says he was a mild man. I'm more at calm than my brother who is physically exerting himself. I'm dwelling in the tent. I'm at home where I receive rest. Okay, so now hear this. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with the same red stew, for I am weary. Therefore, his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright as of this day. And Esau said, look, I am about to die. So what is a birthright to me? Then Jacob said, swear to me as of this day. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Esau sold his birthright to his brother Jacob after coming from the field, telling him, please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary. Esau literally said, look, I'm about to die. So what is a birthright to me? His discernment and his ability to see the value of his birthright was altered because he was weary. Sometimes we can overload ourselves with so many things and so many responsibilities and so many things on our calendars, and overload ourselves with work and overload ourselves with all of these things, that we will sacrifice our purpose. We will sacrifice something that is of value, a birthright. In the Bible, the birthright was something to be of value. If you were the firstborn son, you were automatically given the birthright. And so the birthright came with a lot of things. When your father died, you took on the responsibility of the family. You were the lead of the family. It was a leadership that came with the birthright. There was a responsibility or a weight. There are things that come with the purpose, and we will sacrifice our purpose in exhaustion. Because how can we give when we don't have? So we got to think, what are we giving up because we are fatigued? We're giving up time with God? Are we giving up time with our family? Are we giving up effort in our friendships? Are we giving up self-care? Are we giving up time dedicated to our purpose? Are we giving up the things that matter more due to our fatigue? Now we have no choice. We are put in a position we have been given a limit, so we're put in a position where we have no choice but to rest. And so I'm exhausted, so I can't give to my purpose. I can't give to my friendships. I can't give to my husband. I can't give to my boyfriend or whatever. I can't give to my family. I can't give to my kids. I can't give to God. I can't give to my purpose. I can't give to the things that matter because I'm exhausted. And so if there's anything emotionally exhausting you, because people can emotionally exhaust you, there are people that can drain from you like no other, and that can emotionally exhaust you to where you're not able to give to the things that matter in your life. Whatever is exhausting you, too many hours at work, putting into things that don't matter. Maybe I have too many things on my calendar. And I had to start asking God to help me prioritize. I had to start asking God to help me to steward my time. I have to ask God to show me what my limits are so that I don't overexert to where I have nothing else to give, because I'm fatigued. And when I'm fatigued, I have a fatigued ear. It is harder for me to hear God. When I'm fatigued in my hearing. When I'm fatigued in my doing. When I am fatigued, I'm fatigued in my serving. When I am fatigued, I'm fatigued in my purpose. I have to understand the importance of my rest. And so the last point I want to give you and I want to leave with you is that I have started to honor the Sabbath. I honor the Sabbath because I think it is an important element of us resting, but also honoring the commandment and obeying the commandment that God commanded us to rest. He worked for 6 days and he rested on the seventh day. And so we aren't God. So who are we to think that we can also work on the seventh day? Well, God rested on the seventh day. So we're human. So we must also need that rest. So he commands us to rest. And I believe that God can do more in 6 days than we can do in 7. And so that is my testament to that. I think my beginning to honor the Sabbath has definitely been refreshing for me. I am getting closer to God because of it, and it feels good to know that I am honoring His commands and knowing that He's leading me even through the Sabbath. And so, yeah, that's it for this episode. I hope you were able to gain from it, and I hope you were able to just be able to kind of bring to mind ways that you have been, exhausting yourself, and how you can really just start to learn your limits. I thank you for tuning into this episode. Be sure to like and share with someone you love, and I will see you in the next episode of Outside of Eden.